Not get ahead of ourselves. Lots of things happen unexpectedly. I mean, it's not like you were in the back, like calling spots. Like, and about 7 minutes in, Jim, this is when you're going to pull your gimmick out.
Yeah, no, we talked about nothing on that show, so it was just Jim and I telling stories and kind of free forming it.
Let me just ask, since we haven't talked about this, compare the level of ridiculous preparation for a live show you do with me versus one with Jim Cornette. Because in my head, you guys just meet at the building and say, let's call it in the ring, kid, and there's no prep at all.
Exactly. I said, is there anything that you don't want to talk about? Well, goddamn, what the fuck? And of course, everybody heard about the whole incident with Santino Marella during the week. That was the first thing that I was greeted with when I landed in Detroit was Corny telling me, leave this son of a bitch, and I'm going to kill somebody, and blah, 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 blah. And I just wanted Corny to be there at the show. We got him to the show, we got him calmed down, but I couldn't let it go. I had him tell his version of the story of what took place the day before with Santino Marella at the Cobo Hall, Detroit Legends reunion thing. But if you want to hear that whole version and everything that happened there, you can go over and check out Corny's podcast. He's got a great one. And he'll tell you all about it. I like Santino. I like Cornette. I think they're both great guys, and nothing against Santino at all in any way, shape, or form. I've always found him to be a good guy, so I'm not picking sides here.
It's worth mentioning, Santino, I believe, is a listener of the show. So shout out to Santino as well. But hey, the point is, you never know what's going to happen at a live show. Do I have that right, Bruce?
You absolutely do not. And we even had... bless his heart, Mickey Doyle come up and tell one of the worst stories in the history of the show. The crowd actually, they started to get a little hostile on Mickey, and it was a classic example of Cornette and I in the background basically begging the crowd, stop booing. No, man, this is Mickey Doyle. He's an old-timer, and without guys like Mickey Doyle, there wouldn't be guys like me and Jim Cornette. So... we got through it.
I don't know who Mickey Doyle is, but I can tell you this. He's not booked for November 19th, Sunday at 1 o'clock. It's right before Survivor Series. It's a joint WWE pay-per-view, and the mega powers are going to explode. We're getting the band back together. You need to come see us live and in person. November 19th, we're going to be at the House of Blues in Houston, Texas. Your hometown, obviously Houston needs a couple of smiles, and we're going to bring them on November 19th. Right, Bruce?
Exactly. Can't wait to be there. And you get your tickets over at boxofgimmicks.com. And everybody that lives in the Houston area, pick up the Houston Press next week. I'll be on the cover, and my good friend Sean Pendergast did a huge story. Good God, 4,400 words. About me and the podcast and our live show in Houston. Interviewed Conrad Thompson, interviewed Dan Soder and Shuley and a lot of friends of the show. But most importantly, be there Sunday right before Survivor Series in Houston at the House of Blues. Go to boxofgimmicks.com to get your tickets. Most importantly, just be there. Come on.
Of course, we know what's coming next on the other side. No Mercy, 1999.
Have you or someone you know been diagnosed with mesothelioma? You probably have many questions, such as, what should I do? Where can I get more information? RGT4Law.com can answer those questions and help you get the money you deserve. Call 855-RGT4Law or visit RGT4Law.com and fill out the simple form for a free consultation. Robert Taylor, RG Taylor II, PC and Associates, Houston, Texas.
All right, Bruce, it's time for What Happened When the World Wrestling Federation ran No Mercy 1999. This feels like our 900th pay-per-view show where we're covering the Gund Arena in Cleveland, Ohio. You guys did a lot of major angles, storylines, and major shows at the Gund Arena. What was it about Cleveland that the WWE had a sweet spot for?
Cleveland was a great market, and the Gund Arena was a friendly building. It was run by a friend of Vince's that used to run, I believe, the Hartford Civic Center in Connecticut. and they always gave us a great deal. It's a beautiful building. So the market was good. Why not?
The market was good. Let's run through this. We've got a sellout crowd here. 18,752 folks were on hand for the pay-per-view, and of course that was 17,430 paying a huge gate, $478,156, and merchandise is also on fire. It did $130,303 that night. So they are drawing a hell of a house here, and if you'd like to have a hell of a house, just cruise on over to fullbrickhouse.com. Now you can own a full brick house for only $500 down. That's right. You can even get a full brick house for cheaper than your current rent. Maybe best of all, though, you don't need perfect credit, and your only money out of pocket is $500 down. All of this is happening right now. It's just a few clicks over at fullbrickhouse.com. FullBrickHouse.com makes this fast and easy. Credit scores in the 500s can be approved. You're getting a cheaper monthly payment than your current rent. You even get a bumper-to-bumper warranty. And even if you're stuck in a lease, you can still figure out a solution at FullBrickHouse.com. Go claim your Full Brick House at FullBrickHouse.com and find out how you can make it happen for only $500 down. It's FullBrickHouse.com. NMLS number 65084, Equal Housing Lender. FullBrickHouse.com. Austin is still selling T-shirts like hotcakes, is he not?
Oh, hell yeah. Austin 316 all day long.
And just as a comparison, there wasn't a No Mercy the year before. This is the first year of No Mercy. But No Mercy the next year in 2000 was in Albany, New York, and it did 14,342 fans there. Let's talk about No Mercy in 99, because when I first told Dave Silva, who does our graphics and whatnot over at facebook.com/something to wrestle, he threw up the poster for the May edition of No Mercy, which went down in Manchester, England on May 16th. So I found it interesting that you guys did a No Mercy for a UK only pay-per-view in May, and then you did a traditional pay-per-view also called No Mercy 5 months later. What's up with that?
I like No Mercy. No one in England will watch this. Really no rhyme or reason to it. It was a good name. It was something Vince liked, so do it again. Do it for a major pay-per-view. I think that the idea behind the UK pay-per-views was they were UK only and UK specific. So there wasn't a whole lot of cross-promotion. There was, but not a whole lot. And Vince didn't seem to mind it.
Well, let's talk about the UK pay-per-view thing for a minute, because we've never really spent much time on this. But even here in October of '99, you guys were running another UK pay-per-view. This time it's Rebellion, and it goes down on October 2nd. So these are pretty close together here. Chat me up. What was the thought behind running UK only pay-per-views? How did that come about? What details can you share with us?
It was an experiment with Sky Sports, and Sky Sports just starting out their pay-per-view division in the United Kingdom. So we were the kings of pay-per-view everywhere else in the world, and the UK wanted us to be that standard bearer in the UK for Sky Sports. We offered to do several pay-per-views for them. They were getting our pay-per-views, what were pay-per-views in the United States. They were getting them for free on Sky.
Right.
In the UK. So now with the implement of the actual service, we were going to do specific just for them to be able to get a few more dollars out of the United Kingdom market. So go on over there, knock it out, and we also were experimenting more with not only doing pay-per-views, but also doing television over there at the time. And I don't think we had done it yet. We didn't do that for another couple of years.
What's the methodology behind putting together one of those UK only pay-per-views? We don't want to advance any storylines that people stateside would miss, but we want to give them big matches. What's the thought in putting together a card like that?
We wanted to give the market something unique and something special for the market. That true, if we were going to advance storylines, then it may be just one or two things that we could then bring back and put on the domestic shows. So, yeah, we did do some things, obviously, on the UK pay-per-views, but at the same time, we were looking just kind of as a status quo. It was a house show. It was a house show, and it was a special event for that market that we could put up there that people would pay for, that the entire country could see.
Let's run down what that card was on October 2nd. Jeff Jarrett beat D'Lo to retain the IC title. Godfather beat Gangrel. Val beat Mark Henry. Ivory retained, beating Luna, Tori, and Jacqueline. Chris Jericho beat the Road Dogg. Chyna beat Jarrett by DQ, so Jarrett was doing double duty that day. Kane beat the Big Show. Bulldog beat X-Pac. Edge and Christian beat the Acolytes and the Hollies in a triple threat match. And Triple H beat The Rock in a salad steel cage to win the world title. Triple H and The Rock on top with the belt in a cage feels like a pretty big attraction, as you like to say, right?
Exactly, and it was to be able to give that match not just a regular match, do a cage match, which was unusual to do in the United Kingdom. We had to ship the cage over there and set it all up. Obviously, we left it over there, but it was to give them a unique attraction and something that we weren't doing elsewhere at the time, and so and give them something added value that they would pay for.
Any fun travel memories doing these pay-per-views? I don't know when we'll talk about a UK-only pay-per-view, so maybe not this one in particular, but can you give us anything about, traveling with the boys, hotel stays, going out after, putting together a card, something that went wrong? Any sort of UK pay-per-views you can start us off with here?
For whatever reason, it always seemed that whenever we went overseas, that something ticked in people's heads, and I don't know what it was, but your behavior all of a sudden became erratic or different than it normally would be. Don't ask me why, but it's kind of like, hey, you're in international waters, doesn't count. So you can drink a little more, you can party a little more, and think you can get away with a lot more stuff. And it just seemed like everybody was, maybe it's the time change, maybe it's the accent, I don't know what the hell it is, but it always seemed like people that didn't ordinarily go out went out. People that didn't ordinarily get in trouble were getting in trouble. And it just was a completely different atmosphere because all the boys were on a plane. Instead of being on a plane for a couple of hours, now you're on a plane for 6, 7, 8 hours at a time with each other. You get bored. You start wanting to cut people's hair off. You want to shave eyebrows. You want to steal shoes. You want to have fun. So there were always some kind of story from something that happened overseas that wouldn't necessarily happen in the States. And the other part about it, everybody had to travel together. So the talent was all together. They all had to stay at the same hotel. They were on buses. It was a different atmosphere than their norm in the States.
Well, let's talk about what got us here. If you haven't already, check out Unforgiven 1999. It's available in the archives. It's the pay-per-view the month prior. And we had a great episode in there. We got lots of little side stories about storylines and angles that were going on. One of our more underrated episodes. But if you haven't heard that one, that would be a good place to start before maybe you keep going down the road on this one. A quick recap, of course. Triple H wins the belt there. He becomes the world champion for the second time, winning a six-pack challenge. And this had all the firepower you might need. The Rock, British Bulldog, Kane, Mankind, Big Show, and Steve Austin was the enforcer. Of course, Steve Austin is here in the main event for this pay-per-view. The Monday Night Wars are, of course, in full swing, but the WWF is in firm control at this time. The week before No Mercy, Raw did a 6.1 and Nitro did a 2.6. The night after No Mercy, Raw did a 5.4 and Nitro did a 3.3. So going into the pay-per-view, it feels like just utter dominance. It is the week after too, but all of a sudden it feels like there has been a little bit of a swing in momentum maybe. And a lot of that is credited to Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara signing with WCW. Now, we've talked about that extensively on our Vince Russo show, but we should mention that while Unforgiven 99 was his last pay-per-view, No Mercy 99 is the first pay-per-view where Vince Russo is not a part of the company. How big of an impact do you think that had here, Bruce?
I think that there was definitely an impact felt because we were in a state of flux from a creative standpoint. Sorry, didn't mean to cough in your face. But Vince McMahon was looking for what's the next team? Who's going to be the next person to help me out here? And there were a lot of people vying for that position, and there was a lot of just kind of doing the status quo, trying to finish up stories that had already been started. This was the last pay-per-view that Russo had booked that we had actually had television written getting us to. And I think there was an attempt to continue the stories, to make what we had in place make sense, and then kind of go new from there. But inside the office, I think there was a lot of inner turmoil. Who's with us? Who isn't?
Right. At that point, it doesn't feel, and we covered this on the Russo episode, Russo did not have a contract with the company, so he was free to go. When this happens, does Vince go into panic mode and start double checking contracts for everybody of any sort of significance in the company?
Well, there were not any contracts. An employee doesn't have a contract. They're not a contracted person. So there had never been any reason to have a contract with anyone. You know, you're an employee. There wasn't anything done. So what Vince did was he went back in and did what a lot of big companies do with intellectual properties is they go in and they create non-compete clauses. So if someone leaves of their own volition, that they can't go work for a direct competitor for X amount of days.
Let me ask you this. When did the non-compete first become introduced into the company? Because it existed for performers prior to this. Who smartened Vince up to that, and when did he start to really make that kind of the new standard for the company? Do you remember?
Well, as far as employees, it started right here. As far as talent, I think he always had some kind of non-compete in the contracts. But for employees, he asked everyone to sign a non-compete clause, something that says, again, if they leave the company on their own volition, that they can't go leave and go directly work for a competitor.
For X amount of months or days or whatever.
Correct. 90 days, 60 days, and I forget what it was. I think it was 90 days.
So chat me up. Do you remember there being a wrestler in particular where the non-compete thing would have been a real catalyst for a conversation?
If you're interested.
Obviously, we've covered Rick Rude
like nothing else.
and him not being on paper while he was appearing on TV. We did that in our Rick Rude episode. Was there anybody else, though, that you could think?
Not as far as a wrestler that I remember off the top of my head, because for the most part, Rude was a special deal. Rude was somebody they wanted, and we were doing daily deals with Rick Rude. Every day that he appeared, he signed a contract. As for on the wrestling side at this time, obviously Jeff Jarrett's contract was coming up, and he had not been re-signed, but the non-compete on that side was fairly well covered, and it was now an issue of you don't think about your CFO or your head of marketing leaving you and going to work for the competitor, going to work for Ted Turner at the time. That wasn't something we were really thinking about. And Vince got caught with his pants down with Russo and Ed Ferrara just getting up in the middle of the night and leaving. So he wanted to protect that and came in, and especially those of us that were on the wrestling side of things, he had a non-compete drawn up and asked us to sign him.
Do you remember anybody having any hesitation or pushback about doing such?
Yeah, Terry Taylor. Terry Taylor didn't want to sign it. Terry Taylor refused to sign it, and it was interesting because to the man, everyone else in the company were eager to sign it when they were put in front of them. I know we had lawyers look at them, But for the most part, signed it when it was put in front. I signed it when it was put in front of me. I believe Jim Ross signed it when it was put in front of him. Howard Finkel signed it when it was put in front of him. Terry didn't. Terry didn't want to sign it and argued that, well, if something happens to me here, I want to be able to go back to Atlanta and go back and work for WCW. And Vince felt, well, why are you even thinking about that right now? If you're here and you're with us, then why would you even thinking about going back to work for Atlanta? Terry wanted to be the man. He wanted to be the head writer. He wanted to be the head booker. He wanted to be the guy, the second in command of Vince McMahon. And he said that if Vince made him the second in command, then he would sign the non-compete. And Vince wasn't willing to do that.
Are you in the room when he asked for that?
No.
And Vince just tells you after the fact he wanted to be second command?
Terry told me that.
So we've talked a lot about Terry.
And Vince, well, to answer your question, yes, Vince did tell me that, and Terry told me that.
Who, in your opinion, or I guess, who did Vince believe to be in second command at that point?
At that point, it was Jim Ross.
So Terry Taylor wanted the JR spot.
Terry Taylor wanted the JR. Terry Taylor, in his mind, he wanted what he considered the Vince Russo spot. He wanted to be the head TV writer and book the towns as well. JR was booking the towns. Russo was writing the television with Vince, and JR was in charge of talent relations. Terry wanted all of that. Best of my recollection.
Does he ask for a raise, or does he just want the title?
You know, I'm sure Terry asked for a raise. I don't know specifically, but I would also believe that Terry probably would have been happy with just the title.
Yeah. So, chat me up. How does this conversation go down? You know, you said that Terry told you this, and we haven't talked about Terry much here on the show, but what we have talked about was that you guys didn't always have the best relationship. What was your relationship like at this point with Terry Taylor?
It was a business relationship. Terry was there helping out with creative, and I was there on the talent relations side doing the developmental talent, and again, also trying to help out in creative where I could. Terry, you know, we had a relationship. It just was what it was. It was all business. And Terry felt that he was the only one that could step into that position, and that's what he wanted. And for him to stay, he wanted to be the man. He wanted to be the person in charge. So Vince McMahon at the time was in no hurry to bring anyone in and put anyone in charge. He felt that he had given an awful lot of leeway to Vince Russo, and he felt that he had relied an awful lot on Vince Russo at the time. And for Russo to leave the way that he did, it hurt him. And he wanted to build, you know, maybe build a wall and build a protection so that couldn't happen again. Brian Gewirtz tells the story of, you know, when Vince Russo left, that was the turning point in Vince McMahon's head, that he would never let that happen again, that he would create a team. And he would never have just one or two key people in that role, that he always wanted to have a team. So if one person left,
no big deal.
The rest of the team just carries on.
You know, that makes a lot of sense. And I know a lot of times people want to debate and argue that a team isn't necessary and it was better way back when, blah, blah, blah. But the logic you just laid out makes a lot of sense. At that time, what was the feeling about Ed? Because we haven't spent a lot of time talking about Ed. We've talked a lot about Vince Russo. What was Vince and the rest of the company, some of the boys? Give us something about Ed, because it feels like he kind of flies under the radar. It's almost like he's the tag along. He's the Marty Jannetty. He's, you know, that type of deal.
Ed was a talented guy, but I think the general feeling of Ed was that he was just exactly how you just laid him out. He would tag along to Vince Russo. Really nice guy, like I said, but no threat. It wasn't something where if Vince Russo left and we were left with Ed and Ed didn't, I don't think Ed would have been the head writer.
Do you remember an idea or an angle or a gimmick or something you can share with us that you can point to and say, oh, that was Ed's and it was awesome?
No, I can't.
Do you remember something that was Ed's that wasn't awesome, that was a miss?
No, because it was always presented as Russo, and Ed was always presenting Vince's ideas. So, and not being with them 24/7, I never really saw anything that he brought up and or didn't.
Do you feel like Vince Russo's personality, because he does have a big personality, allowed him to sort of take credit for all of Ed's ideas, and Ed was comfortable just kind of being behind the scenes?
I could see that happening. I don't know if that is accurate or not, because Vince Russo is very bullheaded and very strong, and he has specific ideas. Maybe Ed helped get some of those out, but Russo did usually present them as his ideas. I just can't think of anything at all that was, hey, that was Ed's idea. Like, I can look at people that came after, and I can look at Tommy Blanche and go, hey, that was Blanche's idea. Brian Gewirtz, that was Brian's idea. Michael Hayes, that was Michael's idea. Not with Ed. I really don't know.
Let's talk about something you said a minute ago that I want to circle back to. You said, talking about Vince McMahon and not really wanting to bring anybody in because of the whole Russo thing. You talked about Russo's departure, and you said it hurt him. I can't help but feel like you mean personally, like emotionally. It just hurt his feelings.
It did. That is what I meant.
That's not something we talk about a lot here on the show, because this is a guy we always position as being mad at his own sneezes. So when we're talking about someone having their feelings hurt, that's not normally the way we characterize a conversation with Vince McMahon. Did you have a specific conversation about this Russo jump hurting Vince's feelings?
I did, and Vince is a proud guy. But at the same time, he will admit when his feelings were hurt, or something kind of got to him, and this did. It was, he felt that he had given Russo an awful lot and entrusted Vince Russo, and for Russo to leave the way that he did, it did hurt Vince's feelings. Vince, regardless of how he really is, he sees himself as a very understanding, open, and approachable and caring guy. And I used to say to Vince, you're intimidating. People are intimidated to come talk. God damn it, I'm not intimidating. See what I mean? So I can see Russo's side on not wanting to go and have that discussion with Vince once he made the decision. But I also can see Vince McMahon's side, and I have gone to Vince with some of those topics from time to time, and he's bitten my head off. He's apologized after the fact, but at least I went and talked to him. I know people do, and that is what Vince McMahon was hurt about, that Russo didn't come and speak to him face to face. Just hurt his feelings that he left. It was like a breakup.
Let's talk about the transition, because when Vince kind of has this moment of clarity and he says this will never happen again, and he strengthens his resolve to make sure that he's never totally dependent on one person ever again. Do you remember there being a conversation where we're going to start looking outside for writers, because the person who steps into the Vince Russo spot is Tommy Blancha, and he was not from wrestling, correct?
Correct. And that process had already started, because Vince McMahon had told Russo, I want more help. I want you to have more help. I want some different writers in. I want people from outside of the wrestling business that have a working knowledge of the wrestling business, but I want somebody from the entertainment industry. Tommy Blancha, I believe, was hired by Vince Russo. So he was going to be brought on and be made a part of the writing team. And then when Blancha started, that was Russo and Ferraro's last week. So I don't think Russo ever worked with Blanchett.
Where does, and I know a lot of people listening who are hardcore fans are not going to be familiar with the name Tommy Blanchett, so I'm glad we're spending some time on this. Now, if you came to our live show in LA, you would have met Tommy. He was awesome. Catch us up about Blanchett. What was his background? How did you guys know who he was, or that maybe he could be capable of this? How does that relationship come to be?
At the time, Tommy was working on the Conan O'Brien show, and I believe that Russo may have met him when one of the guys did Conan O'Brien, and they talked back and forth with Blanchett about some different things and different skits they could do with Conan and the talent. Don't remember who the talent was, but Tommy, I believe, was approached that way. And then at the same time, Brian Gewirtz, who had worked out in Hollywood and had been doing stuff with Jenny McCarthy at the time, working on her show, and he had done some things in MTV. So there were this new breed of writer that was going to be coming in to help Russo. And I don't know if Russo felt that was a threat or not, or just, that the timing of the offer at WCW came. I can't begin to explain what his true motivation was to leave, but that feeling was already there. Vince wanting an outsider's opinion, wanting someone from the entertainment world to come into our world and start helping script. A lot of the television shows, format and script.
How do you guys find them? Is this a recruiting agency that you use? Is someone in the front office just making calls based on people you guys have had interactions with? Who's kind of making this first call, extending the olive branch of sorts?
A lot of times, for example, when Vince and I were doing a shoot at Universal Studios, there was a producer there that worked for Universal. He was a freelance for Universal Studios that was putting the shoot together for us, and he worked really well with our guys, and he had his stuff together, and I tried to hire him on the spot. So there's those instances. Human resources, we were putting ads in the trades, we were putting ads in the Hollywood Reporter and Variety. We had headhunters that specialized in specific roles, specific talent, that they would go out and they would try and find some of the best writers in Hollywood. It was a lot of different ways. As far as Tommy Blanchett, his came from working on Conan O'Brien and working with him. He got it. And they liked some of the stuff that he did. So they said, would you be interested in coming over and doing this?
I feel like I should mention, if you're just hearing about Tommy Blanchett for the first time, and I know a lot of you are because it kind of flew under the radar, I should remind you that Tommy Blanchett has a phenomenal 10-minute podcast with Will Sasso. They were both at our LA show. You can check it out. Just look for the 10-minute podcast. It really is 10 minutes, and it's Tommy Blanchett, Will Sasso, and their bud, just telling stories and riffing, and it's hilarious. So I can't recommend it enough. Let's talk about, Blanchett kind of going from Conan O'Brien, and I'm sure he's sitting at a desk and going into an office and doing that usual television production workflow, and now he's thrown into this crazy world of wrestling. How did he adapt?
I thought he adapted really well. I thought that he came in, he didn't come in pretending to know it all. He came in wanting to learn, and he came in with ideas, and he didn't have a pride of authorship. It wasn't, oh my God, this is you got to do my idea or else. He came in with an attitude of what if. Didn't have to tell him. He got it, and he had some funny and good ideas. But for the beginning, Tommy sat back and observed for a long time before Tommy was really thrown in and before he was really made a part of the process. So he would just sit back and observe. We didn't even know that there was a Tommy Blanchett for a few weeks.
Really? He was just hanging out, being quiet.
Yeah, he was hanging out being quiet, but he wasn't a part of when it came nut cutting time and we were actually writing the television and doing the pay-per-views. He wasn't a part of those with us per se. He would go and meet with Vince, and Vince would go over things with him and pick his brain and get his ideas. And Vince wanted to be comfortable with him first before he threw him into everybody else.
So he's there, and Vince never smartens you up. You don't even know this guy's been hired.
We knew somebody was hired. We just didn't know when he was going to start and be a part of the process.
I got you. When do you remember him becoming a part of the process? Is there a particular show or arena or pay-per-view?
I think right after this pay-per-view, right after No Mercy.
Okay. I don't know when we'll talk about Tommy Blanchard again. Now, the first time I said that about Jerry Jarrett, he became a staple on the show. So maybe I won't jinx it here. Chat me up. Some of the more memorable angles or moments in company history that we could circle back and say, that was Tommy Blanchard.
Tommy Blanchard was the one that came up with the idea to hit Steve Austin with the car when we needed to get Steve out of commission for a while. Tommy Blanchard was the doctor that delivered the hand. Mae Young's pregnancy.
That's so awesome.
Tommy was responsible for a lot of the sexual chocolate with Mark Henry. And a lot of the stuff with Brian Gewirtz and Tommy Blanchard as a team. They came up with some pretty good stuff during their time.
So when does Brian start with the company?
Brian started shortly after that as well, and I don't really remember the time frame, but I'll find out and I'll get that for you next week. I'll call Brian's happy ass and say, "Hey, little bass, when did you start with wrestling business?" Because Brian was working for MTV, and I remember Brian's first day coming in, and he was in the locker room with a Yankees baseball cap on. I said that because he's a big Mets fan, but he was wearing New York Mets baseball cap, and he looked like a 12-year-old kid.
Right.
And Ron Simmons just like, "Yeah, who the hell are you? Yo, why are you in the dressing room?" And Brian trying to fit in, didn't fit in. He could be a little awkward at times, but I'll get the Brian to work, so I'll get the lowdown for you next week.
Well, I look forward to us talking about Brian long form, because it feels like, he's probably the most, I don't know that I should say underrated. I just feel like for all of Vince Russo's contributions to the business, he gets his credit 10 times fold, good, bad, and indifferent. But almost no one talks about Brian, and Brian really was the straw that stirred the drink for like a dozen years or more, right?
Oh my God, Brian was a little genius. Still is a genius, and Brian was the one that formatted the show, put Raw together for so long, and took that brunt. He had a great way with Vince. He had a great way with Stephanie, and he did the Rock stuff. Obviously, he's still working with the Rock, in charge of $7. Not in charge of $7, but in charge of their television production and creative on that side. So Brian is an unsung hero, and Brian doesn't get nearly the credit that he deserves, that other people, because he doesn't go out and brag about it. He doesn't go out and say, "Oh, that was my idea." He doesn't go out and say, "Oh, I came up with that." He just moves along. He knows that Vince had to bless it. He knows what he did. He doesn't have to tell people.
Let's move on. We'll come back to Brian, I'm sure. He's probably going to get his own episode at some point. Gorilla Monsoon passes away on October 6th. We talked about this briefly on our Unforgiven show, and we just did a phenomenal tribute episode to Bobby Heenan a few weeks back. Any other memories or short stories you'd like to share about Gorilla Monsoon here?
Gosh, I think I'm pretty sure I've shared it, but all the way up into the end, Gorilla was an avid gambler, and Gorilla loved to bet on anything. And even on Gorilla's, quote, deathbed, Gorilla was calling the guys at the studio saying, "Is there a game tonight? Is there anything? Is there a golf game, badminton game? Is there a chess tournament? Is there something that I can bet on?" all the way up until the end. But it was Gorilla Monsoon had a game room in his house, and no one will know this name, and I hope that there are some old timers that will remember this. There was an old wrestler by the name of Bull Ramus, and Bull Ramus, he was mainly famous in Texas and California, but Bull also worked in the Northeast for Vince Sr. for many years. And Monsoon had a game room in his home in New Jersey, and on the wall in the game room was a plaque that said, "This room donated by Bull Ramus," meaning that Monsoon used to beat Bull Ramus at cribbage and poker and everything under the sun, and that Bull Ramus's the winnings from Bull Ramus paid for this room. And Gino invites him to his house, and Bull Ramus thought that was the nicest thing, that, you know, Monsoon had a picture of him up on his line. He goes, "Oh, Gino, that's so nice. You got my picture in your game room? That's so nice." And then he reads the little plaque underneath it. "This room paid for by the donations of Bull Ramus." And Bull just absolutely went nuts. But Manuel Bull Ramos, big star back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Sweetheart of a guy. But that was the kind of guy that Gorilla Monsoon was. And just a wonderful, wonderful guy.
Well, that's a great story. I don't know that you've told that one before, so I appreciate you sharing that with us. I don't know that a lot of people know that Gorilla Monsoon used to own part of the Worldwide Wrestling Federation. Catch everybody up on how that whole deal went down.
Gorilla Monsoon, Vince McMahon Sr., Arnold Skolin, and Phil Zacco, I believe. It was either Phil Zacco or Toots Montt. They all owned a portion of Capital Wrestling, which was the parent company to the WWWF. And for most people, they viewed that as Vince McMahon, the father, as his company. So when Vincent Kennedy McMahon came in and bought the company, those were all the people that Vince had to pay off to finally own the company. And the payoff was, after WrestleMania 1, that Vince had to make this huge balloon payment to every one of the partners. And if Vince were to miss a single payment, then the partners were able to take the company back in full. No questions asked. And obviously, as history will tell you, Vince was able to make every payment, make his big balloon payment after WrestleMania 1, and took the company over. But yeah, Monsoon was one of the owners.
Let's talk about the company at the time, because it's hotter than ever, and mainstream media is taking note. Business Week actually ran a story that covered the phenomenal impact that wrestling, specifically the WWF, had on television. And at the time, a lot of you may remember, Seinfeld just aired its last episode. So Seinfeld's going away, and all of a sudden NBC is dropping off. So UPN is trying to ramp up, and they're trying to make a big push. And they're doing pretty well thanks to the new SmackDown product. Business Week writes that the man responsible for this surge is Stone Cold Steve Phillips. Your thoughts?
Oh, Steve was over like $1 million. He had this Phillip drop thing that he did.
It was like a screwdriver type move, right?
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was
exactly.
on the head, if I remember.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. He later went on to captain the Maersk and take down Somalian pirates.
And I saw that the salvage site has some stuff.
A lot of what would have been better would have been, because you know what they did here is they combined Stone Phillips and Steve Austin. And so Stone Cold Steve Austin and Stone Phillips have somehow merged into Stone Cold Steve Phillips. That's hilarious to me. So
I love Stone Cold Steve Phillips.
It's phenomenal. I mean, and I think we're technically okay to sell shirts like that, but maybe not. Just in case, go over to brucepritchard.com. And Bruce, when you cruise over there, you're going to see a fine selection of shirts right now, are you not?
Hell yeah. And our best seller right now is the Houston Relief shirt, which all the proceeds are still going to the Houston Food Bank. And because I actually have friends over there, I like to donate to them. They're good people. But I used to be over pronouns pal, no yob, do.
Rumor and Innuendo, Corey Graves' favorite shirt, and then the bell rang, Dolph Ziggler's favorite shirt. George the Rat. Did we get Cornette any George the Rat shirts? It feels like he deserves some of those.
I wore George. When he came in originally on Sunday, he was so happy. He says, "God damn, I thought you were going to wear the damn George the Rat shirt. I was going to be pissed." So right before we went on stage, he went one entrance, I went another entrance, and I changed into my George the Rat shirt for the stage. So he didn't get to see it until he was on stage. And I unbuttoned my shirt, and he saw I was wearing George the Rat. Motherfucker. But you can wear George the Rat by going over to brucepritchard.com, and we got What a Maneuver, FDM, with a very kabuki shirt. The second most recognizable athlete in the world.
Dick was everywhere. The Google machine throws you. STF and W, so many cool shirts. And the best part about picking up a shirt over at brucepritchard.com is when they do, not too long after that, they get a call from Bruce Pritchard himself, right, Bruce?
Exactly, and I get to talk to everybody, and it's been so cool talking to the folks that have got the Texas shirt and the Houston Relief shirt, because we share stories, and I've spoken to a lot of people out in Florida who were affected by Hurricane Irma out there, and it's just nice being able to talk to folks and find out where they're from, what they're doing, and why they like the show. And it's instant feedback, and I love it.
So brucepritchard.com, hook it up. You'll be glad you did. I feel like we should also mention that the WWE is taking some chances here going into No Mercy, because they run the Georgia Dome. And let's remember that the WCW Nitro that set all the records was in July of 98. Well, here we are in October of 99, and the WWF's coming to town. It's October 11th. They draw 33,375 folks. The gate is an incredible $861,000. It's one of the top 10 largest crowds in the history of American pro wrestling, and it's for a fucking Raw. It's unbelievable. This is up here with the WrestleMania at the Silverdome, WrestleMania 3, the Royal Rumble at the Alamo Dome in 97 that we've covered in our archives, the Indianapolis Hoosier Dome, WrestleMania 8, the 1980 Shea Stadium show. I mean, this is a monster show. What goes into the decision making of, hey, let's run the Georgia Dome?
It was time. It was time to go back to Atlanta. We hadn't run Atlanta in a long time. Raw was doing well, so the opportunity presented itself. Why not run the Georgia Dome? So we cut it just about in half when we did it. And we put a big divider up in the middle of the dome, and we used the second half for a lot of our staging and parked a lot of our trucks out there. So we didn't go in saying, hey, we're going to do 70,000 people or whatever the hell it held.
Hard to make it here.
We went in under the auspices that we were going to draw 30,000 people. So we were very happy with the outcome and going back to Atlanta in a big way. So it was just time. That was it. And the opportunity presented itself.
To give you a heads up too, that February 8th, they set an all-time Raw and Monday Night War attendance record at the time. They ran the Sky Dome in Toronto for 41,432 folks. And again, this is for Raw. So there's just a handful of Raws. 2 Raws in 1999 drew 75,000 people. That sounds ridiculous, but it's true. On that show, we should mention this Georgia Dome show. We got Billy Gunn and Crash Holly working together. Ivory was supposed to wrestle Mae Young, but Moolah instead attacks her. We see Edge and Christian wrestle the Hardys to a double countout. X-Pac pins Farouk. Mark Henry has an appointment with a new sex therapist, Dr. Andrea Early. Is Dr. Andrea Early a rib on somebody in the back? Where does this name come from?
I have zero knowledge. I have absolutely no idea where the hell that name came from.
Headbangers beat Jericho and Mr. Hughes. This is when Jericho hit Hughes and then walks out. Big Show finds out that his dad has inoperable cancer, and Meltzer wondered if maybe this had something to do with Gorilla or Brian Hildebrand, because they're using a cancer angle. When people in wrestling have cancer, it feels a little, well, you know. Godfather beat Mark Henry. Bossman comes out and is getting on show about his dad. Joe comes out, but Bossman laid him out with the nightstick. And Al Snow comes in to make the save, but Bossman lays him out too. And Meltzer wrote at the time, they're paying Big Show $950,000 a year for this spot on the card. We talked about Tommy Blancha earlier, but Tommy Blancha was involved in a Big Show Bossman angle, was he not?
Tommy was the one that was, I believe, supposed to shoot the scene with Big Boss Man coming into the funeral of Big Show's father. And the bastard didn't make it, and that was me. So on a Sunday afternoon in Fairfield, Connecticut, beautiful Sunday afternoon, I might add, really nice day, when people would go and kids get in the car and they go to visit their loved ones at the funeral and put flowers on their final resting place. There was a mock funeral with a guy in a Blues Brothers police car with a big speaker on the top of it, going around going, ha ha, your dad's dead. Hey, Big Show, your dad is dead. Ha ha, your dad is dead. And yeah. So if you really want to take a look and examine the absolute absurd, pull up the Big Boss Man's father's funeral. I mean, not Big Boss Man, the Big Show's father's funeral. And know that at the time that there were people paying respects to their loved one all around us, that it was a beautiful Sunday afternoon in Fairfield, Connecticut. And no one told Big Show to jump on the casket or for Boss Man to tear out through the cemetery the way that he did. But hey, there you go. Made great TV.
No doubt about that. Also on that show, we've got Austin and Jim Ross wrestling Triple H in China. Doesn't that seem weird in hindsight? Let's talk a little bit about the angle that they did here, because we would see Jarrett push China off a ramp where she was stuffed inside a laundry crate. Any memories of any of this card I just ran down? Austin and JR tagging, China getting pushed off the ramp in a laundry crate. Any of this ringing a bell?
Yes, as a matter of fact. Again, the absurd. We were doing so many crazy things, and a lot of this was on the heels of Russo, leaving, and some of it he was involved with, some of it he wasn't, that they had laid out. But I remember the brawl with Austin and Triple H, which was fabulous, man. They went all over the building, and there's a famous concession stand brawl. I believe it was Tupelo, Mississippi.
Yeah, the one you're talking about, I think there were several. But I think the one you're about to talk about is the one with Onita. On one side it's Ricky Morton and Eddie Gilbert, and I forget who was tagging with Onita. But they had several of these. But the one you're talking about is where there's glass involved, right?
Yeah, and the guy that tagged with Onita was Masafuchi. And Masafuchi got hit over the head with a jar of mustard, and the shard of glass went in his ear. And he stands there screaming as you see blood shooting out of his ear. But that was a famous concession stand brawl that I think a lot of people over the years have tried to recreate and just go out and do. And that's what we were doing here. It was an opportunity to brawl all over the building and have a unique fight that gets you out of the ringside area and get you out of the backstage area as well. But it was a great brawl. And it was also during the time that Jeff Jarrett was talking about women having a place in the home. So what other better place to put China than in a laundry cart?
This Raw is not done yet. Most famously, you've got Rock and Mankind taking on Val Venus and the British Bulldog. Here's what Meltzer wrote. Rock put a platter of what was purportedly dog crap from bulldogs backstage that Mankind scooped into a nice platter, brought it to the ring with Earl Hebner selling the smell big time. He gave Bulldog the rock bottom into the dog crap. Remember the remark Brett made in a column not all that long ago about a bulldog rolling around in shit and being so stupid to like it? Clearly, that's where this idea came from. So, I don't know when I'll get to say this again. Who booked this shit?
This is a Vince McMahon specialty. There's poopy everywhere. There is okay. This is a Vince McMahon classic quote. There is nothing funnier than dog shit. Dog shit on a shoe, and you gotta get a stick and get it off, and it's on. It gets everywhere. Yeah, dog shit.
What type of shit did you use here? Was this shoot shit or was this working shit?
This was mainly Baby Ruth and $100,000 bars and a lot of grass and corn and. It was a variety. It was actually made and molded.
The shit out of me.
You know, it's amazing to me that you guys have someone making shit when you could have just called Xbox, right?
This is true. Well, we actually had bulldogs there that were actually making shit.
So whose task was making the shit? Is this your magic man, Richie Posner?
Richie Posner made the shit. Richie Posner and what's the other guy's name there? Nick Dahl.
That's the shirt, man.
Yeah.
We've talked about all the props that he's made over the year, and Richie Posner made the shit shirt.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of hand forming each little turd and putting the right amount of grass in it and just the right amount of everything in it.
Hypothetically speaking, what might it sound like if Richie Posner was busy handcrafting the shit and Vince McMahon is growing impatient because this segment is supposed to be happening very quickly, and there's a conversation back and forth about how we're short on time.
God damn it, Richie, are you done with the shit yet? If you need me, I'll make some for you right now, god damn it! Hurry up!
No, God.
In my head, Posner's over there patting out patties as fast as he can. I'm giving her all she's got, Captain. It's just hilarious to me.
This one needs more grass, sir. Yeah.
Where's the corn? This isn't an adequate turd.
But sir, dogs don't eat corn.
I want corn! I want peas! I want, god damn it! Give me some color in the blue!
Oh, that's so awesome. So, as if we're not done with silliness in this show, at the end of Raw, Austin and Triple H are still fighting, and Austin throws him into a room with a rattlesnake and locks him in. Whose idea is the snake?
I think originally it was either Hunter or Steve's, and Vince loved it. We, of course, had to get the rattlesnake. What I remember most about it, unfortunately, was because we did it live. So and we rehearsed the hell out of it because the camera, and you had to have a glass barrier, obviously, between the rattlesnake and where Triple H was. And we cleaned it. We did everything as absolute best we could for the glass panel in between, and rehearsed it 9 times, 100 times, just so that you wouldn't see the reflection of the camera in the glass. And we had it just, absolutely perfect, where it looked great. And of course, we go live, and when Hunter goes in, you didn't see the camera, but you saw Hunter's reflection of himself in there. And that was all Vince saw.
God damn it, I see the reflection! What the fuck? We rehearsed it!
Yeah, it was interesting to say the least. But put a rattlesnake back there, yeah. It's always a lot of fun to just put a rattlesnake loose in a locker room.
Do you remember any of the boys having a particular reaction one way or another to a real rattlesnake being in the room?
Nobody wanted to be near it. I'll tell you that much. Yeah, nobody wanted to be anywhere near the shooting of it because the top of the glass was not that high. And my fear was we had the snake contained. I mean, it was contained. It couldn't get out. And it was trained to attack. So it was trained to lunge and strike. So if it saw something, it would strike. And it worked every single time, man. Every single time we threw Hunter in front of it, it would strike. So my fear was that the damn thing would go up over the glass.
Yeah.
It didn't, but yeah, there's a little bit of fear. Most people don't like snakes. I'm at the top of that list.
So we get the deal here where the snake bites Hunter, and he shows up, I believe, on SmackDown, and he's got this horrendous snake bite on his face. Catch me up. What do you think of this makeup that Hunter's wearing here?
I thought it looked great.
No, you didn't. Did you really?
I thought it was excellent.
Oh my God.
It was what it was.
It's fucking awful. When Vince sees the makeup, does he think? I mean, he's got to realize what we realize. This is awful, right?
Well, we're hoping that it's passable enough for television, and of course, it has to look like makeup so he can tear it off at the end.
Right.
So it was that prosthetic, rubber stuff.
It looks like it's from fucking Party City. I mean, it looks like your 12-year-old.
It's not from Party City. It was from Snakes Bites Are Us makeup. Damn it.
Okay.
It's beautiful.
What did Austin think of the makeup? Austin's always, not short on opinions. What did he think of this?
I think we all kind of went. It looked about as good as Jillian's mole looked many years later. But we just kind of hope that if we shot it a certain way, that the television audience wouldn't notice how bad it looked. I guess y'all did, huh?
Well, I'll tell you what. If you want something that looks better these days, just go pick up WWE 2K18. Maybe what they were missing in makeup back then, the company has really hit a home run with graphics for WWE 2K18. Am I right, Bruce?
Oh, hell yeah, man. I mean, they bring you closer to the ring than you could ever imagine being. I mean, they got hard-hitting action, they got excitement, they got new game modes with deep creation capabilities and everything you've come to love from WWE 2K. And what that means, you can be anybody you want to be. And you're in the action, unlike ever before. And they've also featured the addition of 8-man tag matches, a new grapple carry system, thousands of new animations, and a massive backstage area, and a brand new rendering engine also gives WWE 2K18 a visual overhaul, bringing the drama of WWE to life like never before. You can fight in the backstage. You can have your own interviews in the backstage area. So no matter what you can think of, WWE 2K18, they can make it real. And if you pre-order the deluxe edition to play 4 days early, you get 2 playable versions of WWE Hall of Famer and current Raw General Manager Kurt Angle, along with the WWE 2K18 Season Pass, the Seen Enough Edition digital content, and more. And be sure to check out the official WWE 2K18 in-game soundtrack, personally curated by executive producer Dwayne, that's right, The Rock Johnson. And that's available right now on Apple Music. This is the best. If you love their commercials, you love their games, you do not want to miss WWE 2K18. To learn more about it, go to WWE2K.com and pre-order this today. Look, these are going fast. My son has been going nuts for the last 8 weeks. Every single day he's saying, "Hey, Dad, when is WWE 2K18 coming out? I gotta have it." So he's ready. He's going to get his early. You can do it by going over to the WWE2K.com. Pre-order today. Be like no one.
That's WWE.2K.com. They support the show, and obviously, if you're listening to this, you're a wrestling fan. Don't buy this game anywhere else. Do it right now from WWE.2K.com. We want to show the folks over at 2K and the WWE that you are their target audience, and you are. So let's talk about what's going on kind of outside of the spotlight. Meltzer reports in the October 18th Observer that A&E is working on a documentary for Owen Hart that was going to air on November 16th. And of course, this is just on the heels of his untimely death. What was the company's take on A&E producing an Owen Hart documentary? It had to feel like something that Vince wouldn't be really excited about.
Not really, no. It was too new. You know, it was way too fresh, and didn't feel that it would be. It was just opening up more old wounds.
Chat me up about Steve Austin on Nash Bridges. He had recently filmed some more episodes, and they were supposed to air on October 22nd. Was this kind of his first foray into acting? Did he enjoy it? How did it come about? What can you tell us about Austin on Nash Bridges?
Well, Austin was had the opportunity to come out and do it. It was a special character. And the character on Nash Bridges was about as close to Stone Cold Steve Phillips as you can get. Or Stone Cold Steve Austin. So Steve liked it because it was able to essentially be Steve Austin on Nash Bridges. There was even talk at this time that Steve would maybe get a spin-off series with this character off of Nash Bridges. They were talking about doing a series just with Steve's character. So there were a lot of different things, but Steve was focused on wrestling. Steve wanted to continue. He felt he still had several years left in the wrestling world, and that's what he wanted to focus on. He had a good time. I think out of this, the best thing that came out of this was Steve was in the trailer with Don Johnson, and Don is talking with Steve, and they were friendly and having a good time. And while they were in there talking, one of the production assistants came in and said, "Yes, sir, Mr. Johnson, they're going to be ready for you on the set in 5 minutes." About 5 minutes goes by, and Don Johnson gets ready and goes walking out. He's walking out to the set. Steve's walking with him. And the same production assistant comes up to Don Johnson and says, "I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson, they're not ready yet. It's probably going to be about another 15, 20 minutes. And Don Johnson looks at the kid and says, "Oh, hell, don't make me have to learn your name." And I stole that phrase, and I've used that, I don't know how many times ever since, because I just thought that was one of the funniest things I'd ever heard. Don't make me have to learn your name.
What a fucking asshole.
What?
That's such an asshole comment, and it really fits your personality that you think
exactly.
is a great line. Wow, just treat people like that. Okay. At one point, it's reported in the Observer that there was a plan for The Rock to beat Triple H for the title on September 27th Raw. That one went down in Greensboro. But according to Dave, Triple H complained loudly enough about the idea that it was nixed. Any memories of this September 27th Raw in Greensboro and Triple H maybe getting the finish changed?
I don't ever remember wanting to change the title during that time.
Okay.
Probably chalk that one up to rumor and innuendo.
Meltzer also reported that ECW's Miss Congeniality would be starting in about a month. It was reported here that she was trained by the Hardy Boys and is said to be a good bump taker. For those of you who haven't put it together, she would go on to be known as Lita. What do you remember about Lita first coming into the company, becoming signed? Who recommended her? What did Vince think? Chat us up about Lita coming into the company.
I first saw Lita from Dory Funk. Dory Funk had her at his Funkin' Conservatory at his dojo down in Tampa, and they had taken a lot of pictures, and she had been down there working. So Dory had sent some pictures in and said, "Hey, this girl's name, Amy Dumas. She's going to be going in and working with ECW during this time, but you should really check her out." So we saw her. I remember we called her first, asked what she was doing. She said she was going to go in and do the ECW thing. I said, okay, well, if you've already committed to that, please do that. I called Paul, asked Paul what he had planned. He said he really didn't have anything planned for her long term. I said, okay, well, we're thinking about maybe bringing her in. And then we found out that she was friends with the Hardys. And we saw her work back and forth, and Jim Ross and I brought her up, had a meeting with her, and decided we wanted to bring her in. The initial idea was to package her because she spoke Spanish. She was familiar with the lucha. She had trained in Mexico as well and been working down there for quite some time. We had this guy, Papi Chulo, who was coming in, Mr. Aguilera, and he couldn't speak English. So we thought, well, hey, now let's put a good-looking girl with him who speaks both Spanish and English, and that's how Lita was born. That was the idea behind bringing Lita in the first place. The Funks recommended her, working, starting ECW, and we needed a mouthpiece for Papi Chulo.
I'm sure we're going to get a Lita episode at some point in the future. Let's talk about Taz, because it's reported in the Observer here that Taz vignettes are set to start airing in November, and they're going to build up for a January debut. Of course, he's just finished up with ECW here, dropping the belt, and he's on his way in. Meltzer wrote, his biggest supporter in the company was Vince Russo, as there were those who thought in the WWF his height would be an issue, especially since he doesn't sell well, and his gimmick is almost being a bully tough guy. Do you remember that being the case, and do you think Taz's run in the company may have been different had Russo still been at the helm?
Well, Russo definitely was his biggest supporter, and it was Vince who had really made the move to bring him in. But I also think that Jim Ross was a big supporter of Taz's as well. He liked his amateur background and felt that Taz would be a benefit for us. So let's bring him in and let's do something with him. We signed him. We got him. Now we got to do something with him. We got to make it work.
What was your thoughts on Taz coming in? Did you feel like Taz was long for this world? I don't think anybody would have predicted that Taz's in-ring career would be cut so short. He would really go on to make a bigger name for himself, at least in the WWE, as a commentator.
I thought Taz had value. I thought that Taz had a unique look. His promos were good. And regardless of how tall he was, he could back it up in the ring. He was a tough little bulldog. And the people liked him. You know, they liked him from ECW, and they liked him when he came in for us. So he had it. He had personality. He had something that made people forget about the fact that he was not as tall as the rest of the guys, and you believed in what he was doing because he believed in what he was doing. So I thought that, you know, why not? Why can't you do something with him?
Let's talk about the company at the time, because there's a lot going on here. And the company brings in $76.2 million between May 1st and August 1st, which means revenue is still markedly on the rise. And they're on track for, unless things went south, another $250 million fiscal year. Is this kind of the best business has been since you've been with the company in 99?
Yes. I mean, as far as exploding and those high dollar amounts, yeah, it was absolutely great. And I was there in 87, 88. It was great during that time, but the dollar amounts were just so much more in 1999. I mean, everything we were touching was turning to gold.
Do you remember the MSNBC special Heroes and Legends? They did a show on Vince McMahon. Do you remember that?
I remember it vaguely, not in a whole lot of detail, but I do remember it.
Anything you want to tell us about what Vince thought about that?
I don't think Vince ever likes anything that anybody does on him. I think that there is a part of him that views himself in one way, and he's actually very I know everybody's going to go all bullshit, but he actually is kind of shy and fairly humble, in that he doesn't like to be the center of attention, and he doesn't like other people's interpretation of him.
In his office right now, a few years ago, he had a framed magazine cover of himself on the cover of Cigar Aficionado magazine, and it was framed when he was on the cover of Muscle and Fitness. So I hear you, but at the same time, he's got framed pictures of himself in his office.
He doesn't decorate his office, again, I say that to yes, he.
God, look at my guns. Good God, I'm massive.
Yes, there is that part of him. I'm saying that there is a part of him that wants to be seen the way let me put it this way. He likes to be seen the way he sees himself versus how other people see him. Because most people see him completely differently than how he sees himself.
All right, we're on our way here to No Mercy 1999. Now, let's get started running through the matches. In the first match, Godfather comes out to a big pop until the crowd realizes there's no hose with him, and he starts to get booed. So he calls him out. We haven't spent a lot of time on the Godfather here. Any fun hose stories you can share with us?
Not on air. What the hell? I'm married. I've got kids.
I'm not saying. I'm not asking for dirt.
There was Omaha's going to hate me right now. The term Omaha's comes from the worst hose that we ever got in the world were from Omaha.
What makes a
we're not
good
that
hoe?
pretty.
What makes a good hoe and a bad hoe? Like, what's busy? I don't know. Like, I know how to pick melons at the store. I don't know how to pick hoes. So
you know how to pick hoes.
it's just, hey, babe.
Don't tell me. Don't sit here. I'm sorry. I only pick melons at the store. I know how to do that. When it comes to hoes, I'm just a little inexperienced.
I'm a novice.
That, Bruce. Could you help me with that? How would you pick a hoe? What the? I don't know, Conrad. If you were going to pick a hoe, hypothetically speaking, let's just flip the script here a little bit. If you were going to pick a hoe, what would you look for in a hoe? Color hair.
I was talking about handles. I would want something that had a rubber grip. Because if I'm not wearing gloves.
Yeah, because the wooden handles, sometimes you get splinters and everything from all that hoeing.
Right.
Yeah.
If I'm going to be doing a significant amount of hoeing, I'd like to have a rubber grip. That's all I'm saying.
I'm sure you would. I would definitely suggest rubber in dealing with hose.
So chat me up. Any good hose stories? Did the hose ever get out of hand backstage? Did they fangirl out? Because wrestling's this weird world where you're supposed to go shake everyone's hand, and you can't sit in the wrong seat on an airplane or you're in trouble. I mean, there's all this stuff going on. So when these hoes are introduced to this weird, subculture, how did they assimilate?
The hoes were brought in usually later on in the day, right before we opened the doors, so that they could practice getting into the ring with high heels. And they had a room to themselves. That was the hoe room. And
is that what it was called?
They always had an escort.
Wait, they were escorts?
No, they had an escort. They usually had a bodyguard or someone that came with them. They were kind of segregated from the rest of the talent. There were always, a hoe or two that would wander off and try to intersperse into the rest of the herd.
You said they had an escort, a bodyguard. Is that the shoot pimp, or did you guys go to Hose R Us and they just came with the supervisor?
I went to Hose R Us, and the supervisors would always usually come out with them to make sure that they were safe and make sure they were getting paid.
Real conversation here. How are the hoes found? Does somebody call ahead and just call around to strip clubs? Are they opening up the yellow pages to the escort section? Where does one source a hoe for
very good directory of gentlemen's club establishments throughout the United States of America and Canada.
Down there!
And I had a pretty good relationship with most of the general managers and a lot of the guys that book strippers for various clubs. So whenever we would need hose in certain areas, I would call them and say, hey, I'm looking for X number of girls to be on television at such and such a date. Here's what it pays. And that's it.
Did any of the women ever have ambition of making this more than a one-off? Did they try to sell you on their wrestling ability or their promo skills, or that they had a special talent?
No. When we were looking for someone to speak or take a bump or anything like that, I was always import the hose. I'd find a working hose somewhere.
Well, but did any of these garden variety hose have ambitions to be working hose?
No, not that I can ever remember. No.
Okay.
Most of them were there to get their $100 and get out.
Well, those are good hose.
That's it.
Which gimmick do you think that Charles liked the most? Papa Shango, Godfather. I mean, Godfather is the
Godfather.
Sure.
I think that he liked the Godfather most. Godfather was the most fun. As far as gimmicks, I always loved Papa Shango. I just loved the absurdity of Papa Shango and some of the things. And I remember I used to come up with just stupid shit to do with Papa Shango, like stand in the corner and put a hex on someone and have them take bumps without touching. Just hokey, horrible stuff. But by far, I think Godfather was the most successful and the most fun.
Hypothetically speaking, did you ever roll a fatty with that Pimp Daddy?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Did Godfather have the hookup? Did he have a special connection for some particularly Sean Waltman level good stuff?
Yes.
Okay. How over do you think Godfather was in 1999? I mean, he's got to be one of the most over characters in the entire company at this point, right? I mean, the crowd is just digging everything he does.
Oh man, it was. You watch, go back, and I'll use the Kama Mustafa character as an example and a contrast and compare. You go back and watch Charles as Kama, and then you watch Charles as Godfather. He's having fun. He's enjoying everything that he's doing. It's fluid. That makes a big difference in a character, and I think that the Godfather character resonated with the crowd. They loved him. It was, now it's time to have fun. So here comes the Godfather and his hose. So it was a blast, man. The thing that you forget with the Godfather character, Charles Wright is a badass
And a big dude.
He's huge. He's frigging wide. His shoulders, I don't think he can fit through a door going in straight. People forget he's just such of a nice guy, and he's always smiling, and he's a fun guy. But he's a legit, when they talk about tough guys in the wrestling business, he's one of them. I mean, he's a legit badass. And it just clicked on me. I wrote that down when I was watching the show, because when he takes the microphone and does the thing about farm animals, and I ain't got no farm animals, I got my hose, you don't want none of my hose, now I just got to kick your ass. There was that truth in that promo. Because Charles could kick your ass then, and I'm pretty sure Charles could still kick your ass if he wanted to.
Well, if you get out of line in a gentleman's club in Vegas, you may find out the hard way. Let's talk about his opponent here. He's taking on Midian. And Midian, of course, is the former Godwin that we all remember there. Phineas was his name as a Godwin, and he was the one, if you recall, who was in love with Sonny, et cetera, et cetera. Chat me up about Midian and the eye gimmick, because Midian goes through a phase here, and there's a few different incarnations of Midian. There's naked Midian, which I'm sure we'll talk about another time. But then there's this kind of weird version where he's a part of the Undertaker stable, and he's got an eyeball as kind of his calling card. What's up with that?
Cocaine's a hell of a drug. No. Bless his little heart. Midian wanted so badly to do something and be a part of something. he and Undertaker hung out in real life, and he wanted to be a part of the ministry, and they came up with this Midian character, and Midian shaved his head and legitimately tattooed an eyeball on the back of his head so that he could say, he goes, I've got eyes in the back of my head. Okay. There was always just something missing with Tex, and wasn't a great worker, a wonderful human being. Great. He's a great chef. I can tell you that.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to mention. You know, these days, and it feels like, you know, this happened a lot during this era. Dennis Knight is the real life Midian, and he's only 48 years old. And these days he's a chef. And I think a lot of people are probably a little shocked to hear that, because that's not necessarily what you would imagine naked Midian or Phineas Godwin becoming. But somewhere down in Florida, he's a pretty big time chef these days, right?
He is, and he's tried out for the Food Network, and they've had a couple different pilots with him and doing different things, but he is a legit badass chef, and he found his calling in the kitchen. That's for damn sure. But at this point in the ring, he was no Lou Thesz. Let's just go there.
Speaking of people who are doing damage in kitchens, Viscera is here, and he's got the blue contacts in. Of course, this is the former Mabel, and the world's largest jacket. Hypothetically speaking, where do you think that the company found Viscera's jacket here?
Omar's tent makers.
Omar's Tent and Canvas.
Yes.
Quite a look for Viscera. And the comment about animals, I guess we should mention here, is Viscera has turned down Godfather's offer for hose in exchange for, let's just forget the match and you just take one of my girls. He didn't want to do that on the way here to this pay-per-view. And Midian points out that he prefers animals and he likes them dead. Whose idea was it to kind of insinuate or just flat out say that Midian was really a favor of fornicating with dead animals?
I have absolutely no idea. We made some horrible choices back in the day.
You know what's funny is just everything about this match could not happen in 2017. You couldn't
Nothing.
have a guy out there saying that he wants to have sex with dead animals. You couldn't have a character openly talking about smoking weed, presenting himself as a pimp, calling women hoes. Like, none of this could happen. And it's funny, just a few minutes ago, you said when he came out, the crowd was like, oh, yay, it's time for some fun. Let's shit on women and celebrate drug culture and cheer on a pimp and prostitution. And it's such a weird world at the time compared to now, just, you know, a handful of years later, I guess.
Yes. I got to tell you, last week I texted you and was telling you how much I enjoyed watching the pay-per-view that we covered last week. And this week, I texted you out of frustration after the first 30 minutes going, Gah! Different time, boy, and it's amazing. This is, 18 years ago?
Well, in the show you're talking about, Bad Blood was October 97. This is October 99. So in 24 months, how different is the company, right?
Big time. And there's parts of it where I just kind of hung my head and went, good God, what the hell was anybody thinking?
I think a lot of people thought heading into this match that it would be Godfather Viscera, because Viscera left Godfather laying on SmackDown. But this winds up being a change for the better, I guess, because we get Midian instead. In the ring, Godfather throws a body block to the corner and does the hoe train. That's the name of the move. And then finishes with a schoolboy. It gets a quarter star in the Observer. And then after the match, referee Tim White gets mauled by the hose. Did Tim White enjoy a good hoe?
Well, I think he enjoyed getting mauled by the hose. He's a good dancer, too. Who wouldn't want to get mauled by a bunch of hoes?
Pat Patterson?
You never know.
Who did you prefer of all the different incarnations that we would see Midian in? Regular Midian, naked Midian, Phineas Godwin, Southern Justice. What's the best incarnation for him? I guess Shanghai Pierce.
Phineas.
There you go. We haven't talked a whole lot about Viscera here on the show. Of course, he's the former Mabel. He's coming in as part of a tag team, Men on a Mission. Of course, they win the World Tag Team titles. He eventually turned heel, wins the King of the Ring tournament in 95, even headlines the SummerSlam against Diesel for the world title. He's back here in the company in the summer of 98. How does him coming back into the company come about?
Just a big bastard. You know, I think that Mabel, Viscera, Big Daddy V, I just called him Nelson, gets a bad rap sometimes. I think that for a big man, that Nelson was a hell of a worker. He could move, he could do stuff, and I think that he was underrated for whatever reason, because his stuff was convincing. He could actually cut a decent promo, and it was real. When he landed on you, it looked like it killed you. Sometimes it did. But I thought that he was a pretty damn good talent, and going back and watching some of his older stuff, I look at it and go, damn, man, Nelson wasn't bad. He really wasn't. And with the tag team package, Men on a Mission, with Bobby, you know, everybody thought, well, Bobby can go in and do all the work because he was the smaller of the two. But later on, in many later years, when we had Mabel as a single competitor, you know, shoot, I thought that Mabel did a pretty damn good job in the roles in which he was in.
Of course, Nelson has left us now. He passed away in 2014. I don't know when we'll talk about him again. Any fun memories you can share with him? How was he to travel with? Any ribs? Anything lighthearted to share about Mabel?
You know, Mabel came to us from courtesy of Jerry Lawler, and I even remember the first place that Lawler told us about these guys in Memphis, Tennessee, and he said, you've got to see this tag team. He says, the one guy is bigger than a door. I'm like, what? And so we brought them into TV, and we were still somewhere up in the Northeast, and the son of a bitch was bigger than the door. Couldn't fit through the door in the dressing room, that being Mabel. But he just was a good guy. I don't even know why I'm telling this story, but I'll never forget, somehow we got on the subject of colonics. And Mabel talked about getting a colonic. And the fact that when they did this colonic and he held out his hands about, I don't know, probably about 3 feet wide, he says, man, he says, they did it, and he goes, a piece of steak that had been in me for like 5 years came out, and it was this long. In my head, I'm just sitting there thinking,
we're on a podcast. We can't see your hands.
I said about 3 feet long.
Okay, but you just keep making hand gestures.
I know. Well, I'm doing that for you. Just you understand.
I got it.
All right, about this long.
I got it.
About 3 feet long, folks, and skinny. And I just remember just laughing on him. Nelson, out of curiosity, how do you know that is a steak from 5 years ago? And what the hell are you doing looking at shit and measuring shit that came out of your ass? That just was funny to me. But he was extolling the virtues of colonics.
Well, I don't know that, I would say that I don't know that I'll be able to get a good night's sleep tonight after having heard that story.
Maybe you need a colonic.
Well, I was going to say, thankfully, I have Brooklinen, and I've realized that we spend like a third of our life in sheets, and I'm not sure that maybe your sheets are taking care of you the way they should be. So we want to tell you all about brooklinen.com. You see, there you'll get high quality sheets and bedding at a price that won't keep you up at night. Isn't that right, Bruce?
Oh, hell yeah, because they're the only sheets that go on my bed now. I absolutely love them. They were founded in 2014, and they offer simple, beautiful home essentials, and they're luxury sheets without the luxury price. And man, you will love these sheets. I love mine, and if you just try, man, you're going to love them too. And right now, you get $20 off and free shipping when you use my promo code WWE at brooklinen.com. And they are so damn confident you're going to love these sheets. Like I said, they're the only sheets I have on my bed now because they are just that great. They're so confident, they're going to offer you a risk-free 60-night satisfaction guarantee and a lifetime warranty on all of their sheets and their comforters. So there's really no reason not to try them. I mean, all you got to do is go save $20 and get free shipping at brooklinen.com. That's BROOKLINEN.com. Use my promo code WWE. These are the best sheets ever. And we ask you guys, support our sponsors to help keep us on the air. And Brooklinen is a sponsor that I use every single day, and I love it.
I can't recommend them enough. I gotta admit, I was a little skeptical. I tried them out on one bed. I liked them so much, I replaced the sheets on all of the beds here at Con Radisson. You're going to love it too, and you get a special hookup and support the show. Make it happen, Captain. Go to brooklinen.com and use that code WWB.com. Next up, we see a video package from SmackDown. Of course, this shows Triple H with the nasty wound on his face. Eventually, he's saying, I'm going to give up the world title. It doesn't mean more to me than my life. And of course, China is involved here. And China and Triple H say something like, I hope you're happy, Steve. And when Austin looks at China, Triple H attacks him, takes the wound off the face, and we're shown that, hey, he really is the cerebral assassin. This was just makeup. They then show us the Heat interview. So back then, of course, prior to the pay-per-view, you would get Sunday Night Heat, and they would do a live version of the show from the arena where the pay-per-view is taking place. So Michael Cole catches him out back right before the show and interviews Triple H. And today, Triple H says the snake tried to bite him, and he ripped its head off and threw it in the trash, and he's going to do the same thing to Austin tonight. Then we get a promo from Ivory. I want to talk a little bit more about Ivory here because we haven't spent a lot of time talking about her on the podcast. Ivory is one of the more underrated female wrestlers at the time. Wouldn't you agree, Bruce?
Yeah, Ivory was great. I think that a lot of people discounted her because of her association for a short time with the Glow Girls, but Ivory was a hell of a talent.
Of course, Lisa Moretti is the real-life Ivory, and she had been around the business for what feels like forever. I think she debuts in like 86. She goes until 2006, but she comes into the company here in 1999. How does she go about becoming signed with the company? Do you recall?
I remember seeing her in California, and she was in between. She was doing independence, and she was working out there. She looked great. We were just looking for new female talent, and we were in a process of bringing in a lot more females to go through the developmental process. And here was someone who had experience. We brought her in. She was ready to go. So, man, she was on the roster.
So she debuts on TV as one of the hoes for Godfather in like January of 99. By February, she is in storyline, the love interest of Mark Henry. Time passes. I'm sure we'll cover this more in greater detail another time. Now she's the women's champion, and she's going to be taking on, interestingly enough, Fabulous Moolah, who here is 72 years old. And when Moolah and May are making their entrances, this is an opportunity of a lifetime for Jerry Lawler to crack all kinds of jokes here. Of course, Ivory's out next as the champion. And to say Ivory is in phenomenal shape here is an understatement. I mean, she looks like a fitness model. This may be more underrated than it should have been at the time, because at the time, you know, you've got all of the different Attitude Era divas, and it's almost, you know, the bikini era of sorts, where it's how little can we get the girls to wrestle in. Ivory has to do a little bit of that, but she's probably a more legitimate in-ring performer than most.
And she looked like an athlete. She
Big time.
was an athlete, and she looked absolutely fabulous, as did the fabulous Moolah.
Well, so here's where we're going with this. Moolah becomes the oldest recorded champion in WWF history, 72 years old, when she pins Ivory in about 3 minutes. She first won a world title in 1956. No other wrestler on the show here was even born in 1956, but she actually won her first belt there. There's no heat for the match, according to Meltzer. And Meltzer wrote, "Of course, the wrestling was unbelievably bad, but there was something about the atmosphere that made the match palatable. Maybe it was the amazement in seeing 76-year-old Mae Young take bump after bump. How she hasn't broken in two is beyond anyone's comprehension. But I guess it just goes to show she's as tough as her reputation. Ivory did a splash spot where she missed to the left, and Moolah never moved. That was the silliest looking spot on pay-per-view this year. Moolah later did a splash off the bottom rope and was Ivory, but she didn't move fast enough and got her anyway. Mae Young took bumps off the apron from a clothesline and a second time from a drop kick. Moolah was in slow motion, but her forearm blows looked more real than the punches thrown by half the young wrestlers in the business today. Ivory tried a tope on Moolah, seemingly to get caught diving through, and fell straight down and barely grazed her. The finish saw Ivory hit Young with the title belt, and she took yet another bump off the apron, and this gave Moolah a chance to deliver the slowest schoolgirl in history for the pin, -1 star. This feels like something everybody would have known was a bad idea. One of the worst matches in WWE pay-per-view history here. But a credit to Moolah, because my takeaway was, especially for 72, she was up and down when she was bumping a lot faster than I imagined that she would have been.
Now, why would it be a bad idea?
Why? Listen.
Why? No, the crowd was up for it. The crowd seemed to enjoy it. It was positively, absolutely god-awful. But the nostalgia side of it, for Moolah to wrestle in her 40th or 50th year in the ring and be champion again, it was the least that we could do for everything that the contributions that Lillian Ellison had made to the wrestling business. And it was just kind of a fun ha-ha spot. But oh my God, you talk about the bumps that Mae took. And what people forget on the bumps that Mae took, she's taking bumps off the apron to the floor in high heels, folks. She's taking bumps at 76 years old or however old she is in high heels. And she's getting up. And it was, if you know that the relationship between Moolah and Mae, and Moolah was the dominant one in that relationship, and Johnny Mae was just really the tough as nails older one, but Moolah always was like she was taking care of Johnny Mae. And at the end of the thing, Johnny Mae trying to hold up the belt, Moolah grabbing the belt away from Johnny Mae. They're just little nuances that I found extremely funny, especially considering their relationship, and they'd been friends and known each other for so long. They were just like an old married couple. They were hilarious. But my God, the punishment that they took in this match, a lot of these kids today couldn't take.
It's worth mentioning that her return to the ring here in 99 caused Moolah to start experiencing dizziness, and her doctor had her wear a heart monitor, and eventually she had to be admitted to the hospital where they found some clogged arteries, and she had viral pneumonia, where she wound up being in intensive care for 24 days, of which she was unconscious 15 of those. So she's didn't have the best run here in 99 with health. After leaving the hospital, she slipped and wound up cracking a couple of vertebrae too. So she has back surgery in December. So she did make a return here, but at a great cost to her health. Maybe not the best idea. You know, it would be weird to not talk about Fabulous Moolah and her relationship with Vince. I don't know when we'll have an opportunity to do it here. This was like as good as any. chat me up about what Moolah's relationship was like with the company, because she's not a person without controversy.
Well, Moolah was she wasn't the original, but she learned from her promoter. Oh my God, the Buddy Lee in Tennessee from years and years ago, and Buddy Lee booked all of the women wrestlers and had them. He got a percentage of everything that they did, and later on, Moolah adopted that same thing, where she would train the women, and then she would book the women. She got a percentage of everybody that she booked out. So Moolah and Vince McMahon Sr. had been friends for many, many years. Moolah had always been able to work New York once they allowed women to wrestle in New York, and she always supplied the women wrestlers to the majority of the promotions across the United States. And Vince always held Moolah in very high esteem, and she always provided the girls. If you were a female wrestler, chances are you worked for Moolah, or you worked independent. You didn't get a whole lot of bookings, because Moolah, in the way that the promotions were back in the old days, was, it was a very tight industry, and you used who you were supposed to use. So Moolah trained a lot of girls, and everybody, if you went through Moolah's school, she got a percentage of your earnings from that point going forward in the wrestling business. She got you booked. She got her PC. I need my PC, honey. So she was a ruthless business person, and she was tough as nails. And you go back to Madison Square Garden and Vince with Wendy Richter, when Wendy didn't want to drop the women's championship, he put Moolah in there to beat her, and that was the original screw job.
To make sure it happened, because he felt like Moolah knew how to handle herself, and she could take care of Wendy if Wendy got out of line.
Yeah, and Moolah had no problem with that whatsoever. So she was tough as nails, and she got in. And when you talk about, was this a great idea? Most of this was always Moolah and May. They wanted to do this. They would not have been happy just sitting on the sidelines. They wanted to work. They wanted to take bumps. They wanted to be active in doing something. So if she got hurt doing it, well, by God, at least she got hurt doing something that she loved. And she did it all the way till the end, and that is the way she lived life on her terms, and those were her terms.
There's lots of negativity surrounding Fabulous Moolah. There's rumors out there that she would set the female wrestlers up to be exploited sexually, including Luna Vachon claiming that when she was 16 years old and training at Luna's camp, at Moolah's camp, Moolah sent her out of state to be photographed by another man. Of course, you can imagine stuff happens. But there's a big talk that she didn't just take her part of the booking fee, that she paid the girls just enough to survive and made them totally dependent on her. They would have to live on her property. She would handle their training, their food, and allegedly there was a lot of substance abuse stuff going on, piled on with sexual abuse. She's just not this rosy figure that the WWE may have wanted her to be once upon a time, or positioned her to be once upon a time. And I think that's a lot of the reason that this most recent tournament that we saw with the WWE this past year was called the Mae Young tournament rather than the Fabulous Moolah. Would you agree with that, Bruce?
I really don't know. And, you hear all that, and a lot of it, some of it could be true. To me, a lot of it is rumor and innuendo, because I never spoke to anybody that came up and ever made any of those allegations to me personally. And my dealings with Moolah going back, good God, 30, 40 years, whatever it is, were always very positive. Yes, she did have a reputation for taking her money and getting her cut. But then you hear the other side of it, and the girls that did live with her saying, hey, she broke me into the business. She gives me a place to live. She feeds me. There's two sides to every story. And the Lillian Ellison that I knew was an extremely sweet woman, sharp businesswoman, and she fought for what she believed in. And she was a tough old broad that was able to last in a man's business for all those years. So especially when you think about starting in the 1950s and the way that the wrestling business was and being dominated, it's male dominated business. Still to this day it is. But she survived. She not only survived, she thrived. She did what she had to do. I don't know if any of those things are true. I never witnessed them. I didn't hear a lot of that until many, many years later, after the fact, after she was gone and things of that nature. And as many stories as you can find negative, you can find positive about her as well. And I choose to remember those.
A lot of the rumor and innuendo about why these stories didn't come out sooner was Moolah had the ear of everyone in the business who mattered. So if you went against Moolah, she could essentially blackball you, because Vince and other promoters would go to Moolah whenever they wanted to book women. And if you wanted to be a women's professional wrestler, you pretty much had to go through Moolah. So rather than just taking her 25% booking fee, she would also charge them for rent, travel, food, etc. So the net was tiny. But if you really wanted to be in the business, that's kind of what you had to put up with. And the craziest accusation that was thrown out there was from Sweet Georgia Brown, where her testimony was that she was raped, given drugs, and made an addict in an attempt by Moolah and her husband to control her. And you hear all this kind of sordid details that you can go research on your own, because most of this didn't happen in the WWF. But it is something that is, if we didn't bring it up here, I don't know when we'll talk about it again. Moolah wins the belt here and then drops it back to Ivory 8 days later. Do you remember there being any sort of